Hey everybody, welcome back to Sip and Talk. I'm Joe. And as always, I'm ready to dive into some seriously juicy info with you all today. It's like we're mixing up a knowledge cocktail here. Strong stuff, but oh, so smooth going down.
And I'm Sunny, your friendly neighborhood fact checker. I'll make sure we get all the ingredients right. Speaking of mixing things up, you know it's always a good blend? Travel whiskey and discovering awesome new things. You have to check out our friend Mickey's YouTube channel, Mickey to Life.
Yeah, Mickey's the best. He's always got something cool going on. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Whatever time zone you're in right now, welcome back to the Sip and Talk recording studio.
Hello, everyone. Good to be here.
I am so excited to get into today's topic. And to all our Sip and Talkers out there, welcome. Before we, really get into the weeds today, I just have to bring something up because I am honestly still recovering from it.
Oh, I have a feeling I know exactly what this is about.
Yeah, do you remember a Ghost Month special from last year?
Yeah.
Because I was so utterly terrified after we recorded that I literally went home and left every single light on in my apartment for like a solid week.
Vividly. I remember the aftermath of that recording session quite well, actually.
My electricity bill was astronomical.
Mm-hmm.
And, the specific folklore we talked about, the rule that says don't hang your laundry out to dry at night because wandering spirits might try on the empty clothes.
Yes, the classic midnight laundry warning.
Right. And that is just an absolute logistical nightmare for a modern tech worker. I mean, midnight is literally the only time I have available to do my chores. I was standing in my kitchen at like 1 a.m. just staring at my washing machine, spinning, treating it like it was some sort of paranormal gateway.
I also recall you trying to completely shut down the air conditioning in the studio right in the middle of our recording.
Well, yeah.
Because you felt and I quote, sudden paranormal chill in the room. You were entirely convinced we had invited something in.
It was freezing. The vibes in the room shifted entirely. I mean, my arm hair was literally standing up.
The vibes were objectively 64 degrees Fahrenheit.
Oh, whatever.
I know this because I had just walked over to the thermostat and bumped it down to offset the heat coming off the studio lights. There was no spectral visitor. It was just, highly localized climate control.
Okay, fine. I'll concede the thermostat point. But that lingering paranoia is exactly why today, for our international audience, we are pivoting to a cultural observance that is definitely, a bit warmer, much more grounded in reality, though it is still entirely ancestor-centric.
A very necessary pivot, I think.
Exactly. We are talking about the Qingming Festival, or as we often call it here in the States, Tomb Sweeping Day. I actually like to pitch it to people who aren't familiar with it as this annual mandatory family-wide cemetery deep cleaning mission.
It's a surprisingly accurate, pragmatic way to frame it, because if we look at the structural baseline of Qingming, it's fascinating to contrast it with American approaches to memorializing the dead.
Like Memorial Day.
Right, take Memorial Day.
Yeah.
The cultural mechanism is just entirely different.
Yeah, because for us, Memorial Day has evolved into something that's, often pretty detached from the physical reality of death. It might involve a neighborhood barbecue, maybe, taking advantage of a mattress sale, and perhaps laying some flowers if you happen to live near a military cemetery.
Exactly. It's respectful, absolutely, but it's a relatively passive experience for the average citizen. You are observing a memory.
It's just observing, yeah.
But Qingming is not an observation. It is a profound participation. I look at it as a mandatory annual audit of your land and your bloodline. It's rooted in very rigorous physical tasks.
You're actually out there doing the work.
You don't just show up in your Sunday best, look at a polished headstone and leave. You wear clothes you can get dirty in. You work the land, you pull weeds, you scrub the stone, and you engage in deeply specific regional food rituals to recover from that labor.
Which actually brings me to this weird weather phenomenon. Because whenever this holiday rolls around, it seems like the weather just deploys this built-in melancholy filter. It almost always rains.
It does. It's remarkably consistent.
Right. So the mission for today's Sip and Talk is to really unpack this.
Yeah.
We're going to figure out if this rainy, nostalgic atmosphere is driven by poetic romance or cold, hard meteorological data. And ultimately, we want to explore Qingming as this incredible shared cultural open source.
That open source concept is key. But to really understand how a physical act of weeding became an open source cultural phenomenon, we have to start at the foundational layer. We need to look at the what and the who.
So take us back. What is the actual mechanical origin of this day before it got so emotionally heavy?
At its absolute core, Qingming was originally just one of the 24 solar terms in the traditional East Asian lunisolar calendar.
Like just a date on the calendar.
Strictly mathematical and astronomical. It lands exactly around April 4th or 5th every year, depending purely on the elliptical orbit of the Earth. The term itself literally translates to clear and bright.
Oh, so it wasn't even a holiday at first.
Not at all. It was a seasonal marker signaling that temperatures were finally rising and rainfall was increasing. It was nature's green light for an agricultural society. It basically meant the frost is gone, time to start plowing the fields.
So it was essentially the ancient equivalent of like an Outlook calendar reminder for farmers. Hey, it's April 4th, time to plant the rice.
Precisely. Purely pragmatic. But human culture abhors a vacuum. Over centuries, this agricultural marker slowly accumulated layers of meaning. Because think about the reality of an agrarian society coming out of a long, brutal winter.
Everyone's heading outside anyway.
Right. The earth is thawing, you have to go out into the fields. And since the family burial plots were typically located on the hillsides right next to the agricultural land, you naturally checked on the graves while you were out there.
To make sure the winter snow didn't just, like, wash the grave away.
Exactly. Over time, this practical necessity combined with huge family reunions, spring outings, and eventually highly specific regional foods.
And food is where you really start to see the regional variations. Like if you look at Taiwan, you have people eating popia or rendang, which is this massive spring roll.
Yes, very dense in calories.
And if you travel over to Japan around this exact same solar term, you have people eating botamoki, a sweet rice and red bean paste treat. And in parts of China, they eat qingchuan, these bright green sticky rice dumplings.
The caloric density is definitely not an accident. Sticky rice, sweet bean pastes, peanuts. You needed that energy to hike up a mountain and swing a scythe.
Okay, let me synthesize all of this for anyone listening who operates with a modern Silicon Valley tech mindset. The formula here basically equals missing your ancestors plus the entire family being forced to wake up painfully early.
That is a remarkably efficient summary. But the transition from just checking the graves to a formalized day of mourning didn't happen by accident. It was catalyzed by a story.
Oh, the Jizitu legend.
Yes. The origin of why the sweeping and the specific food traditions permanently merged is tied to this legendary historical figure, Jizitu.
I was reading up on this before we started recording, and the story of Jizitu is absolutely wild. I mean, it reads like a premium cable historical drama. The level of extreme behavior here is just off the charts.
It really is one of the most intense, visceral pieces of historical lore. We're looking at the spring and autumn period of Chinese history, so roughly around 600 BCE.
A super chaotic time.
Intense political fragmentation, constant warfare. Jizitu was a fiercely loyal official who aided a prince named Chang'er. This prince had been targeted for assassination by his own family and was forced into exile.
And he wandered around for, what, 19 years?
19 years of wandering across harsh, unforgiving terrain. And Jizitu was one of the few retainers who stayed by his side through the absolute worst of it.
When everyone else was just bailing on him.
Right. And the legend reaches its climax when the entourage was completely lost and starving to death. They had run out of rations. The prince, Chang'er, collapsed. He was delirious, basically on the brink of death.
So they have no food, no hope.
Nothing. This is when Jizitu commits an act of unimaginable loyalty. He walks away from the camp, takes a knife, and literally cuts a piece of flesh from his own thigh.
Oh my God.
He uses that flesh to brew a bowl of meat broth, brings it back, and feeds it to the starving prince to save his life.
Okay, we need to just pause and truly unpack the gravity of that.
Yeah.
Because in a modern context, a loyalty program usually means like you get a free coffee after 10 purchases, right?
Slightly lower stakes, yes.
This guy executed the most hardcore, agonizing loyalty program in human history.
Yeah.
Cutting off your own flesh in an era before antibiotics or anesthesia to make literal leg soup for your boss.
The risk of infection alone would have been a death sentence.
Yeah. It's a level of commitment that my modern brain just cannot even process.
It is the ultimate sacrifice of the self. And the biological reality of that act, the pain, the recovery while still marching, is staggering. But it worked. The prince survived. And years later, Chang'er finally reclaimed his rightful throne and became Duke Wen of Jin.
And this is where the story pivots from, like a survival thriller into a tragedy of bureaucracy. Because once the prince becomes the duke, he's handing out rewards, right?
Yeah.
Land, titles, wealth.
Compensating all his political allies.
But incredibly, he completely forgets about Jizitu. The guy who mutilated his own leg to keep him alive gets literally nothing.
It's a stunning oversight. But the truly fascinating psychological element is Jizatui's response to this betrayal.
Right, because if it were me, I'd be kicking down the palace doors, I'd roll up my pant leg, point at the scar, and demand half the kingdom. Or at least, like, a corner office.
That would be the expected human reaction. But Jizatui viewed loyalty not as a transactional investment, but as an absolute virtue. He believed demanding a reward tainted his service.
So he just leaves.
Yes. Instead of asking for his reward, he packed up his belongings, took his elderly mother, and disappeared deep into the mountains to live as a hermit.
And then the Duke finally realizes he messed up. He panics because having your most loyal guy ghost you makes you look politically weak. So he marches his army out to the mountain to force Ji to accept his reward.
But Ji refuses to engage. He won't even show his face.
And to solve this, the Duke decides the best strategy is to set the entire mountain on fire to smoke him out.
A catastrophic miscalculation born of arrogance. He thought the fire would act as a forced eviction. But Jizatui was so fiercely committed to his silent protests that he refused to move. When the fires burned out, they found Ji and his mother burned to death, wrapped around a massive willow tree.
So Jizatui essentially executed the most absolute, hardcore version of leaving someone red in the entire history of human interaction.
That is a very modern way to put it, but yes.
The Duke set the actual environment on fire, and Ji still refused to reply. It is incredibly dark.
The Duke was utterly devastated. And to honor this tragedy, he decreed the Hanshi Festival, the cold food festival. For 3 days, an absolute ban on lighting fires was enforced. You could only eat pre-prepared cold food.
And because this cold food period fell right next to the Qingming solar term when everyone was already out in the fields, the two events eventually merged.
Exactly. The agricultural marker and the historical tragedy fused together.
It really highlights the core tenet of the holiday. Do not forget the people who matter, which naturally leads into how families honor that memory today. And in Asian culture, that usually involves eating.
Food is the primary vehicle for memory.
Which brings me to a foundational rule of culture that I just deeply respect. Sadness cannot be processed on an empty stomach.
It's a profound biological reality. You cannot navigate grief if your blood sugar is crashing. And this leads to what I consider the most fascinatingly contradictory workflow of modern tomb sweeping.
The emotional whiplash is so real. Walk us through the 4 steps of a modern sweep.
Step 1 is incredibly solemn. The family arrives at the gravesite, usually on a steep hillside. The first action is physical labor, weeding the grave, sweeping away winter debris. It's quiet, respectful work.
You really get your hands dirty.
Once it's pristine, you move to step 2, which is earnest praying. Lighting incense, bowing, speaking silently to the ancestors. But then, the moment the incense is placed in the burner, the atmosphere completely fractures. Step 3 is an abrupt pivot to domestic squabbling. The aunts and uncles start a fierce debate over whose store-bought fruit is sweeter.
I told you not to buy apples from that guy. They're always mealy. It goes from silent reverence to a Yelp review of local produce in 3 seconds.
And that seamlessly transitions into step 4. The whole operation devolving into a massive family picnic right there in the cemetery.
It's so jarring if you're used to Western cemeteries where it's quiet and sterile. Here, you have a massive tarp laid out, kids running around, and a huge meal being served directly over the ancestors' plot.
And we have to spotlight the culinary aspect, particularly the runbing, or popia. It's a thin, fresh spring roll filled with shredded cabbage, pork, bean sprouts, tofu.
Poetically, it's about wrapping up the spring season. Realistically, it's the one day a year you can legally eat 3 massive rolls loaded with crushed peanuts and pure sugar without an elder lecturing you about your diet.
It's a dietary amnesty day, yes. But if we pull back, the true social function of this endeavor goes beyond calories. There are 3 modern, unspoken rituals that define the Qingming experience today.
Oh, I know these. Number 1, the highway traffic jam meditation. Millions of people leaving the cities at the exact same hour, the highways just become parking lots.
It forces a mandatory patience. You are trapped in a vehicle with your family.
Which leads to ritual number 2, getting completely lost looking for the ancestors' plot.
Because they only visit once a year, a tree falls down, and suddenly the map in the uncle's head is completely obsolete.
The physical landscape is constantly shifting, and while wandering, ritual number 3 occurs. The elders complaining loudly that the landscape didn't look like this back in my day.
It just sounds like a recipe for a huge argument.
It is, but it's productive. I theorize that Qingming serves as a mandatory annual version update for family memories.
Wait, an annual version update? I love that. Like downloading patch notes for your family tree to fix bugs in your relationships. Precisely. Because you are stuck in traffic or wandering muddy hills, the polite barriers break down. The small talk runs out and people start actually talking.
This is where you get the real family tea. You find out which relatives have secret grudges over a borrowed necklace from 1995, or the unvarnished stories about the rebellious uncle who tried to start a rock band. It's a lore drop more dramatic than Netflix.
The weeding is just the pretext. The actual work is the maintenance of the family narrative.
So if this outdoor picnic and lore update is so crucial, why does the universe always seem to rain on their parade? This leads us right into the science behind that melancholy filter.
We have to strip away the romance and look at meteorology.
Because there's that famous ancient poem by Dumu. During the Qingming season, the rain falls in heavy drops. The pedestrians look as if they have lost their souls. It's cemented the idea that the universe is genuinely mourning.
As beautiful as the poetry is, the atmosphere does not experience grief. We have to look at the data. In early April, across East Asia, you have the Western Pacific subtropical high, a massive body of warm, moist air pushing northward.
So millions of tons of warm, wet air bullying its way up.
Yes, but the winter weather pattern hasn't fully surrendered. The residual cold air mass from the Siberian high-pressure system pushes down, and it refuses to retreat entirely.
It's an atmospheric tug-of-war, the cold giant pushing down, the warm giant pushing up.
Exactly. And because they are often equally matched, they lock into a geographical stalemate over South China. In meteorology, this is called a stationary front.
So it's not a quick thunderstorm that blows over in an hour.
No, the warm air is forced to glide slowly over the dense cold air. It cools, moisture condenses, and the rain band just hovers there, sometimes for weeks. The result is endless, dreary drizzle.
Which perfectly mimics the feeling of grief. It's dull, it lingers, it's exhausting.
Yeah.
Nature is basically setting the stage lighting for a sad scene by accident.
It is. However, if we pull the historical data, there is a massive geographical reality check. This melancholy rain is strictly a southern phenomenon.
Wait, strictly southern. What's happening in the north?
In North China, Qingming is characterized by severe, dry spring droughts. Instead of gentle drizzle, they are getting blasted by cold winds and intense sandstorms from the Gobi Desert.
Hold on. So you have millions of people in the north reading this famous poem about drizzly morning while they're standing in a dry field getting blasted in the face by sand.
That is exactly what happens. Dumu wrote his poem in the south, but his poetry was so powerful it became a pan-regional emotional expectation. The literature overwrote the local meteorological reality.
The power of a good poem. It convinced an entire civilization that it rains everywhere. But having demystified the weather, we need to pivot to the present day, because this ancient festival is trying to survive in a modern, hyper-fast digital world.
And that transition is creating serious friction. There are several intense societal debates happening right now.
Let's objectively map out these ideological clashes. We're not taking sides, we just want to present all angles.
The first clash is tradition versus ecology. Traditionalists argue that burning incense and paper money is non-negotiable. The smoke literally carries your thoughts and spiritual currency to the ancestral realm.
But the ecological pushback is getting frantic. You have millions of people lighting open fires on dry, brushy hillsides. The wildfire risk is massive. And the air pollution burning tons of cheap paper creates huge spikes in PM 2.5 particulate matter.
It's spiritual duty colliding with public health. And this environmental pressure, plus the extreme distances of modern urbanization, has catalyzed the digitalization debate.
Right. And coming from Silicon Valley, the rise of cloud sweeping is fascinating. People are building digital memorials online. You click a button to light a pixelated candle, but it goes further into the gig economy. You can hire online surrogate sweeping services.
The logistics are remarkable. If you live in Beijing and the tomb is in Sichuan, you hire a local proxy via an app.
Exactly. You hire an avatar. A real human goes to the grave, sets up a tripod, dials you in via live stream, cleans the grave, and bows on your behalf. It's treating grief processing like a DoorDash delivery.
It's highly efficient. But critics argue this strips away the physical weight of the ritual. The friction, the exhaustion, the mud on your shoes. That friction is what forces your brain to process the loss. Turning it into a sanitized virtual chore hollows out the ritual.
It's like sending a hug emoji instead of actually driving across town to hug a grieving friend. The data gets there, but the biochemical reaction doesn't, which ties into the clash of psychology versus social burden.
Psychologically, weeding acts as a collective grief processing mechanism. You heal through physical labor.
I get the theory, but let's be realistic. In today's high-stress society, especially with the 996 schedule, 9 a.m. to 9 p.m., 6 days a week, this pilgrimage is viewed as a crushing social burden. It's expensive, you're already burned out, and you're tracked with relatives interrogating you about your salary and why you weren't married.
That tension is undeniable. However, from a sociological standpoint, we live in an increasingly atomized world. People move away, community structures dissolve. In that context, Qingming acts as a powerful social stabilizing force.
How so?
Unlike Western extreme individualism, where you might become a free-floating atom, Qingming mandates a physical return to your roots. It places you in front of a stone that proves you are a link in a continuous chain. That forced proximity maintains the fabric of society against modern isolation.
It's like a societal anchor. And this concept of connection really challenges the modern idea of cultural ownership. If everyone is modernizing these traditions differently, who actually owns them?
That is a highly volatile question on the internet today.
It is. You see these arguments online all the time. This is my culture. You stole it.
Yeah.
Let me use an American analogy. We view the hamburger as profoundly American.
Even though minced beef patties originated in Hamburg, Germany.
Yes. The immigrant brought the concept, but the American context reshaped it. Culture shouldn't be viewed as a patented invention locked in a vault. It should be viewed like open-source software.
That is precise terminology. Qingming isn't the patented heritage of a single modern nation. It's the underlying code of the entire Asian rice-growing civilization.
Let's look at how this code has been localized.
Well, look at South Korea. They have Hansik, celebrated alongside Arbor Day. They eat cold food, specifically mugwort rice cakes and plant trees. The earth is thawing, so if you don't weed the graves now, they'll be destroyed by spring overgrowth. It's a pragmatic response.
And Japan?
Japan celebrates Higan around the spring equinox. They visit temples and eat batamochi. It reflects an East Asian philosophical view of balancing light and dark, life and death.
And Southeast Asia?
The tradition traveled with immigrants to Malaysia, Singapore, and Thailand. Eating popia became a local staple. Culture flows with human migration.
And then Taiwan is this amazing melting pot, combining traditions from different immigrant groups and preserving ancient rites. It's about preserving diversity, not claiming orthodoxy.
People use the version of the code that works for them.
Okay, my favorite takeaway from today. Qingming is essentially the Asian Coachella of ancestors.
The Asian Coachella. I've never heard a scholar make that connection, but explain.
Think about it. Different countries are different stages, different languages, entirely different local foods at the concession stands. But everyone is performing their own unique remix of the exact same underlying song about memory, spring, and family.
The logic holds up. Culture evolves, it is not claimed. Like the weather systems we discussed, culture drifts across borders without a passport, watering every piece of land it touches.
The water is the same, the flower's local. So as we wrap up, what does this mean for you, the listener? I want to bring it back to the emotional core.
Ultimately, Qingming is not a sad holiday.
It's a gentle acknowledgement that while people leave us, the relationships don't disappear. This physical act of sweeping helps the living locate themselves within the long river of time. You are the bridge.
And that's why people ironically report feeling lighter and more at peace after an exhausting day at the cemetery. The psychological grounding has been reaffirmed.
So true. While the poet said the rain makes you want to lose your soul, I view the rain as nature washing away a year's worth of dust. Whether you burn physical incense or click a digital candle, the essence is connection.
And we see this globally. In the U.S., we have Memorial Day, or the widely celebrated Day of the Dead, adopted from Mexican culture. It's a universal human search for dialogue with those who shaped us. Now, a mandatory disclaimer. Our exploration today was an exercise in looking at facts without prejudice against any nation or group. We encourage listeners to think critically.
Always.
And if any geographic trends or tech analogies sounded like investment advice, they strictly are not.
Protect the portfolio. All right, if you enjoyed this expansive journey, please subscribe to the Sip&Talk podcast so you never miss an episode. And a massive shout out to our old friend Mickey. He travels constantly, so go subscribe to his YouTube channel, Mickey to Life, to check out his brand new travel vlogs.
Highly recommended. I want to leave you with a final thought. The next time someone claims a cultural practice belongs exclusively to them, remind them that culture is like the atmosphere. It covers us all, regardless of drawn borders.
I love that. And on a practical note regarding the atmosphere, if you're heading out to the hills this week, remember to bring an umbrella. Seriously, do not end up looking like a drowned rat like I did last year. Stay safe, stay dry, and as always, stay curious.